Hey, what's good? It's Woog. One encouraging thing about the Deontay Wilder interview with Brian Custer, first interview since his disastrous rematch versus Tyson Fury, a TKO loss for Wilder. But one encouraging thing about the interview is that Wilder appears very open to working with the new trainer. When asked by Brian Custer about working with the new trainer, Wilder did acknowledge that he likes Derek James. That's Errol Spence and Jermell 154-pound Charlo's trainer. Wilder also said he likes the great George Foreman. He says that they talk often and Foreman imparts advice. But it actually sounds like Wilder has someone else in mind who he'd like to keep on the low for now and not reveal to Custer. But when asked if he'd consider working with a new trainer, he said, yeah, I'll work with another trainer. But also noted that he found it hypocritical criticism of people saying Wilder needs to fire his trainers before the Fury loss, when Wilder was looking spectacular, but many believed one-dimensional. Then to this newer narrative of, man, he really needs to keep Mark Breland around. After Mark Breland did what many people thought was a solid to Wilder by throwing in the towel and showing that he had an actual concern for Wilder and his long-term health, which Wilder also finds suspicion in Breland's intentions in throwing in the towel. But that's another conversation. But Wilder's basically saying, first you want my trainers fired when you think I'm one-dimensional. Now you're telling me to keep my trainers around. Well, we were questioning his training and development because he seemed to be getting increasingly reliant on one-punch knockouts, which he just rattled off another two versus Dominic Breazeale and Luis Ortiz in their rematch. And Wilder was looking increasingly one-dimensional. I hadn't seen the Wilder that outpointed Bermane Stiverne for Wilder's first career decision win in their first fight since that fight. And that was way back in 2015. That's when Wilder won the WBC title. It was Bermane Stiverne that looked like the stalker in that fight. But Wilder operated intelligently behind a jab, and he was assertive, he was agile, he had good instincts. I don't think there was one knockdown in that fight, but Wilder won just about every round. It was actually a similar strategy to what Anthony Joshua used in that rematch versus Andy Ruiz. You've got like a half a foot on the guy, height-wise, jab, and don't let him collapse the pocket on you. Wilder did that to Stiverne when Stiverne was still good. But since that, it's been a feast or famine type of thing, where as you're watching the fight, you realize that when Wilder doesn't drop you, he often loses the round. Favorable judging aside, of course. I saw Wilder given a lot of rounds over the years that he didn't win. It happened against Gerald Washington back in 2017, 7 fights ago. It happened in the first Luis Ortiz fight, 5 fights ago in 2018. Granted, Luis Ortiz, even at 40, is very difficult to win rounds against, and is still kind of a boogeyman that people don't seem to want to fight. In fact, the best fighter that Luis Ortiz has fought besides Deontay Wilder is Bryant Jennings. How can nobody have fought this guy by now? Povetkin, Joseph Parker, somebody. Luis Ortiz only has 2 losses on his record, and they're both to Deontay Wilder. But anyway, Deontay Wilder's crushing power and his selective use of his right hand have been the key to his success. He's much less of a woo-woo sweet science guy or even a dig in and start going to work on the body type of guy. Nah. I'll say that he's been a very good defensive fighter, underrated defense. But people have been wanting to see whether Deontay, given his size and physical gifts, could develop into something that put other potential tools to work. I mean, they're never going to compete with the right hand, but they don't need to. Imagine Wilder catching someone with a left check hook or popping somebody with a triple jab, but then turning that third jab over into a short left hook. These are the type of things that many of us have long stopped holding our breaths for. So the idea of a fresh pair of expert eyes and a fresh mind coming into the circle of Wilder's influence and doing some deep work with the former champ, this all sounds awesome. The question is, if the main objective is to beat Tyson Fury, if that's what we're building ourselves to be able to beat, how much do you want to retool what's already been built? What I mean by that is, if you took Wilder and you took his skills that he has right now and went to the open market to fight a list of opponents not named Tyson Fury, or Luis Ortiz for that matter. I think that Wilder would have a lot more success than a lot of the recent skeptics might believe. I would favor Wilder today at 35 over Joseph Parker. I'd probably pick Wilder over Andy Ruiz. I'd pick Wilder over Dillian Whyte, even before that recent knockout of Whyte. I'd certainly pick Wilder over Alexander Usyk, the undefeated, former undisputed cruiserweight champ, who won what I thought was a razor-thin, probably even fight versus Derek Chisora. But that's another discussion. But I'd still go Wilder there over Usyk. Same if he were to fight the very tall Robert Helenius, who just upset the undefeated Brooklynite babyface Adam Kownacki in Brooklyn right before the quarantine. But I'd take Wilder in that one at 35 years old. You know, Wilder was once scheduled to fight Alexander Povetkin. Now, all Povetkin testing positive for the banned substance meldonium controversies aside, the fact that Wilder was willing to fight a guy as good as Povetkin back in 2016, fight never happened, it was canceled, and Wilder fought instead Chris Arreola, the former title contender turned journeyman. But the fact that Wilder was willing to fight Povetkin told me that the guy was serious business and truly believed that he was the best in the world. And as dangerous as I knew Alexander Povetkin was, I was kinda leaning Wilder. So how much retooling and reschooling of this clearly effective fighter and devastating force, Deontay Wilder, do you really want to do? I mean, as long as you don't have him overthinking in there and not trying to rewire the instincts, then shoring up certain things might not hurt. Help him to use his sometimes effective jab more effectively. Or mix in a quicker, less committal left hook. But you definitely don't want to stray too far from what's already gotten Wilder to this level, which I think we can all, or at least most of us, agree is pretty damn high. Former WBC champ defended his title successfully 10 times, and all of those, except for the one draw versus Fury, ended via knockout. Deontay Wilder's been unbelievable. Had one of the worst nights imaginable in the ring versus Fury in the second fight. God, Fury looked like an absolute nightmare in this debut Sugar Hill Kronk Gym Tyson Fury collaboration. Fury was an absolute monster, an enormous and very technical one, unfortunately for Wilder. But the idea that Wilder apparently does want to get back in there with Fury and is open to working with a new trainer, plans to work with a new trainer, although he's not dropping clues, this is a bit of good news if you're a Wilder fan, coming out of this otherwise very interesting and to some perhaps concerning interview with Brian Custer. But viewers, who would you like to see training Deontay Wilder? And do you see this interview as being good or bad news if you're a Wilder or a Wilder fan? There's obviously a bunch more to unpack from this interview. I'm dropping some other commentary about the interview today, so check that out. Leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog, thanks for tuning in.